And welcome back to another Sportsnaut interview. Today, we are joined by our guest, Jarrett Bailey, who is an NFL writer for the Sporting News. And that is our topic of conversation here today is my top 5 NFL storylines. We're going to ask Jarrett his opinion and get some of his thoughts on those top storylines as the season is now underway. We had the Ravens and the Chiefs kick it off on Thursday night with the Chiefs coming out on the winning end of that one with a close call. But Jarrett, there's a lot to get into here, so we're going to dive right into it. The number one storyline that I believe going into this NFL season is, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs and their quest for a three-peat. It's never been done in the Super Bowl era here in the NFL. They got off to a good start last night with a 27-20 win over a good Ravens team. But what are your thoughts on the likelihood and the possibility of the Chiefs getting the three-peat done here this season?
Yeah, I wrote about this probably around a month ago for Sporting News, just kind of like a deep dive into, it's never been done before, but the good news for the Chiefs is that the hardest part for them is already behind them. Like 2023 was, we talked about it throughout the years, like, oh my goodness, this Chiefs team, like finally somebody, or, it's finally, they're taking a gap year. And then of course, week 18 rolls around and they just kind of flip a switch and play well throughout the playoffs and obviously win another Super Bowl. And so if they can overcome that in 2023, where the offense wasn't very good, the receivers were bad, and kind of ride their defense and, lean on Mahomes when they really needed him to, rather than him be the, be all end all. If they can do that, then barring any like catastrophic injury or anything like that, I don't see why they can't win it again. Because like I said, the hardest part for their three-peat is already done. And you look at, what they've lost. I mean, yeah, L'Jarius needs a big loss. But defensively, they're still loaded with talent. Trent McDuffie's still one of the best corners in football. Chris Jones is still at the top of his game. They got a bunch of really good linebackers with Leo Chenal and Drew Tranquil, Nick Bolton. We saw what Xavier Worthy can do. I mean, he had 3 touches last night. 2 of them were touchdowns. Rashee Rice really fit his role well, where they just went 5 wide a lot and utilized him as a slot guy. And if there's a linebacker lined up against him, they took advantage of that. So this is still an offense that's firing on all cylinders, a defense that's still very good. If any team in history can do it, it is the Chiefs. So obviously that's going to be something that's talked about throughout the year as they chase, something that's never been done. And while it's never been done, they are, they have as good of odds to do it as any team in NFL history, just because they have that quarterback, that head coach, that defense. So it's hard to bet against them. Obviously, history is against them, but if anybody can do it, it's them.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as they have Reed and Mahomes there, I think they're going to have a very good chance as well. What do you make of the Super Bowl hangover? I mean, do you think it's a real thing? The 49ers, they've been very close the last couple of seasons.
Right.
It also, for them, it was not a off season and not a very ideal off season. There was a lot of drama there with the holdouts and whatnot. That stuff is behind them now, but do you think there's any chance that they catch that Super Bowl hangover?
Yeah, so Greg Rosenthal and I actually talked about this. He hopped on my show a couple weeks ago, and he's been very loud about saying that the Seahawks are going to win the division, that he likes the Rams a lot. And eventually, like the attrition, you feel like it's going to set in at some point, right? For the 49ers, where they're consistently in the NFC Championship game. They've been to a bunch of Super Bowls. Eventually, it feels like things are going to slow down. They've had a lot of noise this offseason, even though they bring back Brandon Ayuk and they bring back Trent Williams at, the midnight hour. All of that, like, if that was what's going to happen regardless, why didn't you take care of it to begin with and avoid an offseason of speculation? So I feel like that could play a little bit a part into it, where, Ayuk wasn't there throughout camp and everything. They could start off a little bit slow. Is the Super Bowl hangover real? I mean, we've seen teams. I mean, I'm a Steelers fan, and, both Super Bowls that they've won, over the past 20 years, they answered it with a season that they didn't get back to the playoffs. So it's definitely real in some cases. I don't think it's a universal thing where, like, okay, you got to the Super Bowl, you're going to, be bad next year. But I do think that the 49ers could take a small step back and, maybe only win 10, 11 games and still be a playoff team, but not look as dominant as they have in the past handful of years.
Yeah. Storyline number 2 for me, I think it has to be the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, there was so much hype surrounding this team going into last season. We all know how that played out. Aaron Rodgers getting hurt just a couple of plays into week 1. He's back now. He's healthy. They still have that really good defense there to help him out. And from all the reports that I have read and I have heard about him, is he looked really good in camp. Now, I have them winning the AFC East this year. I don't know how you feel about that, but how good do you think the Jets can be this season should Rodgers be healthy for all 17 games?
So I do game by game predictions every year, the week of the season, and I have the Jets as a playoff team. I have them as the number 6 seed in the AFC. I don't have them winning the division. In large part because, for anybody who follows me or knows me, they know that I pray to Joshua Patrick Allen every night before I go to sleep.
Yeah, yes, I do.
It's to me, it's still the Buffalo Bills division to lose. I know that a lot of people have really focused on their losses over the offseason, but I've talked about it all offseason where I've said, okay, yeah, like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, they've been defensive leaders for that team, and that's not nothing, but they're both safeties in their mid-30s who are gone. I mean, I don't think that that's going to really move the needle one way or the other. If you want to talk about Diggs, like I get that he's still, a good receiver, but he didn't have a 100-yard receiving game after week 6 last year. The offense, when Joe Brady took over, leaned a little bit more into being a efficient offense rather than, a bombs away deep ball offense. They lean more into the run game. They utilize James Cook more. They utilize Josh Allen as a runner more. So for Buffalo, like as long as you got 17 under center, I'm not counting you out. He's 11-2 against the Dolphins in his career. The Jets have given him, a little bit of fits in games that have gone, back and forth between those two teams. But overall, I still think that Buffalo's going to win the division and be a playoff team. I still think the Jets are going to be very hesitantly, I put the Jets in the playoffs just because it's the Jets. And I understand that Aaron Rodgers being there should make them better by default. But it's one of those things that I'm nervous about, putting them in just because of the history of the Jets. They haven't been to the playoffs in a decade and a half or whatever it may be. So I hesitantly put them in. I still think they're going to be in just because even if Rodgers isn't, a top 5 quarterback, which I don't expect him to be, but if he's, a top 12, 15 guy, which I do expect him to be, then that defense should do a lot of the heavy lifting and they should be able to get in. But to me, it's still Buffalo's division to lose.
Now, Jarrett, I live out here in Western New York, so I know that you're making a lot of people happy out in my neck of the woods with your talk about Josh Allen and your prediction for the Bills. I don't share my thoughts about the AFC East, though, with too many Bills fans around here. But anyways, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this next storyline for me. Number 3, I think, is the Detroit Lions. I mean, going into last season, the Detroit Lions were one of the more trendier picks around the league with people that you talk with. This year, I think it's different for them. I mean, they were nearly to the Super Bowl last year. They lived up to that hype. If it wasn't for a couple of questionable decisions by their head coach, maybe they would have beat the 49ers and gotten into the Super Bowl. But anyhow, this year it's different for them. They are the hunted this year, not the hunter. They're going to have a bullseye on their back. And I'm very curious to see how they respond to that new role. It's just not something that the Detroit Lions are used to. What's your take on that?
I think the Lions are going to be right around as good as they were last year. I think Green Bay is actually going to win the division. Green Bay is kind of like my darling of the 2024 season, where I really love what Jordan Love's doing and what they have over there. But in terms of Detroit, I in the predictions and everything that I did, I have them as the number 5 seed in the NFC, so the top wild card spot. I think they're going to win 11, 12 games. And it wouldn't shock me at all if they're back in the NFC title game trying to, exercise those demons that, came up in January against the 49ers, where you just said it, where if Dan Campbell just makes a couple level-headed choices, they probably hold on and beat the 49ers and get to the Super Bowl. And, who knows what could have happened if and when that would have happened. So they're still one of the more viable threats in the NFC and a very wide open NFC. So it wouldn't shock me to see them back in the NFC title game. It wouldn't shock me to see them in the Super Bowl. Like I said, I like Green Bay a lot this year, so they're my pick to come out of the NFC. But would not be surprised, nor I don't think anybody would be upset to see the Lions in the Super Bowl either. I think they've just kind of become like America's team, where everybody just wants the Lions to do well. So I think they're going to be right back where they were last year. I think that they'll be in the NFC title game. It's just a matter of can they get the job done this time around.
Yeah. They really became kind of the darlings of the NFL last year, is what I was saying last year. And I think they're going to be very good and very competitive as well. So I agree with you on that one. Number 4 storyline on my list, I have the young quarterbacks, the rookie quarterback class coming in to the draft. They were touted very highly from the very, very small sample size that we saw in the preseason, it looks like, they're off to a good start. At least we all know the unfortunate injury with JJ McCarthy. So it'll be another year before we get to see him in regular season action. But, you look at Caleb Williams, Daniels, who knows how much of May we're going to see this year. Bo Nix is going to start. How good do you think this class could be overall, and how much of an immediate impact do you think they could make this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of drinking the Caleb Williams Kool-Aid right now. It's hard not to do after what we saw in preseason. And again, you try to take those things with a grain of salt because it's preseason and all of that. But I'm big on the Drake May hive. I think that New England, they're doing something similar to what the Bears did with Justin Fields, which is they're going to start Jacoby Brissett. The Bears started Andy Dalton. The entire fan base is like, just put in Fields. Well, for better or worse, in that situation, the Bears were totally comfortable with Andy Dalton getting brutalized every week behind a bad offensive line, and they didn't want to risk Justin Fields getting hurt. I think that's what we're kind of seeing right now with New England is like, look, we want to see Drake May play. That offensive line is going to get him killed. It's going to kill his confidence, and it could stunt his growth. We're fine with Jacoby Brissett getting hammered every week. That's fine. That's not our long-term plans.
Yeah.
I think we'll see Drake May at some point this year. I understand why we're not going to see him right away. I would have loved to see him right away, but I understand the precautions that they're taking. So I think May is going to end up being the best of this bunch. Personally, I'm just really big fan of his game. I think Caleb is going to be good. And again, we go into draft classes every year, and I understand why the network's got to do it. We got to hype up the quarterbacks. All these guys have a chance to be a star. Well, realistically, no, they don't. Like there's going to be some of them that just aren't good. I think that May and Williams are going to be the two best out of the bunch. I think McCarthy went to a good spot with Kevin O'Connell to really, get the most out of his talents. I think that his ceiling is kind of being like a more handsome Brock Purdy. Is that a good way of putting that?
Yeah, that works.
And so I think that those are kind of the three that I would circle as like likely being the most successful. I wasn't a big Michael Penix guy. I think that Bo Nix has like Mac Jones written all over him, where he might look solid his rookie season. But I think that if he does look good in his rookie season, that might be like the peak that we see him play at. So the three that I have the most confidence in, really it's the two that I have confidence in. It's Drake May and Caleb Williams. And I think JJ McCarthy went to a good spot to really elevate him. But May and Williams are the two that I think are going to be, the what's the saying I'm looking for? The cream of the crop. There it is.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that all plays out. We got to give him a few years to develop and whatnot. The final storyline that I have on my list is the Philadelphia Eagles. They got off to a great start last year, 10-1, and then it completely fell apart for them. Ended in that bad playoff loss to the Buccaneers. Now they have new coordinators on both sides of the ball. They went out and spent some money on a flashy new toy, Saquon Barkley as the running back. And, I think there's a lot of pressure on the head coach this year, Nick Sirianni. We heard some things in the offseason about some possible tension between, he and the quarterback. And so he's got to get it right this year. He's got to get the train back on the tracks. What's your take on that?
Yeah, Philadelphia, they have an advantage of playing in a not good division. It's going to be a two-horse race with the Eagles and the Cowboys. But with Dallas, I just think there's too much noise and just dysfunction, and the whole Dak thing is just going to be looming over them. So I think that Philadelphia is going to win the division. But, they're really banking on Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean early on as rookies to really, step up and play major roles in that defense. James Bradbury, not very good anymore. Darius Slay getting a little bit older. Who knows who their linebackers are going to be? I mean, that's been a position of struggle for them over the past 5 years or so. And they're really banking on all these Georgia kids really stepping up. Like outside of Jalen Carter, okay, what's Nolan Smith going to bring to the table? What are all these other guys? Are they going to be able to, step up? Eli Ricks, who they drafted, is he still there? I need to go through the Eagles roster. So much like young dudes that we all applauded Howie. Oh, great job, Howie. You had a great draft. And a few of them just didn't play well. So defensively is where I'm most concerned with Philadelphia because there's a lot of holes and a lot of unknowns. Offensively, it's funny how Kellen Moore over the past 2 years has gone from, he's a prodigy to, is Kellen Moore good? Do we know this is his third team in 3 years? He got ousted in Dallas, obviously not in Los Angeles anymore because they made a lot of changes, and now he's in Philadelphia. So the offense is going to look different. I think getting Saquon Barkley is obviously a great thing for the offense because he's a very dynamic player, and they're kind of hoping he can be for them what Christian McCaffrey was for the 49ers. They have the talent. I think that Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. Obviously, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, one of the best wide receiver duos in football. If Saquon's effective on the ground, like they're going to be hard to stop. But it comes down to, is Kellen Moore going to be able to run this offense efficiently? Is he a good offensive coordinator? And can Vic Fangio get something out of this defense and all these young guys? So there's a lot of unknowns around Philadelphia, but I think the talent will help them elevate over any sort of question marks.
Yeah. Before I let you run here, Jarrett, did you have a chance to make a Super Bowl prediction? And if so, do you mind sharing it with us?
Oh man, begrudgingly. So I've picked the Bills to make it. I've picked the Bills to come out of the AFC for the last 2 years. So maybe the third time's a charm. So the Bills in the AFC, the Packers in the NFC, and you know what? Maybe taking a page out of the Chiefs playbook will work out for the Bills, where they become a more efficient offense and lean on more of a run game, and just hope that their defense can really help get them to where they need to be. This will be the year that they finally put a ring on Josh Allen's finger. So there's a lot of homerism in that. I'm fully aware of that. I make no qualms about who my favorite player to watch in the NFL is, but I'm hopeful that Josh Allen and the Bills can get the job done. If it's not Buffalo, I think that Houston and Cincinnati are probably the biggest threats to the Chiefs outside of them. So I'll stick with it though, and be, rather than going chalk and saying, okay, Chiefs and who gives a damn, I'll say Bills, Packers, and the Bills get the job done.
Bills, Packers. I tell you what, you'd make my wife and my children very happy if that did happen. We appreciate the time, Jarrett. You can follow Jarrett on X at JBaileyNFL. I encourage you to do so, and I encourage you to follow his work over on the Sporting News. Take care, Jarrett, and enjoy the opening weekend here this weekend.
You too, buddy. Yeah, I appreciate it.